Why people who prefer being alone often had this childhood. Two kids grow up. Both end up adults who feel calmest with the door closed and the room empty. One of them is protecting an old injury. The other is doing something a psychologist in 1958 called a sign of emotional health. They look identical from the outside. This is about how to tell which one you are. Contemplation, broken by a curiosity jolt. There's a story we tell about people who prefer being alone. That somewhere in childhood, something went quiet that should have stayed warm. It's a tidy story, and it erases the difference between solitude and withdrawal completely. So before we go further, that difference is the whole point of the next few minutes. For some people, the sad version is exactly right. I'm not going to take it from them. But notice what that story does. It collapses everything into one explanation, as if wanting the room to yourself and hiding from the room were the same thing. They are not, because there's a second story. Almost no one tells it. And it starts in a house that, by every measure people usually check, was fine. June is 29. He translates books for a living, mostly alone, mostly at night, and he prefers it that way. When he was a kid, his house was calm, not cold, calm. His parents were steady people who didn't perform their love and didn't withhold it either. They let him disappear into his room for hours, and never made disappearing feel like a betrayal. He'd build whole worlds out of nothing and surface for dinner like he'd been somewhere. No one asked him to explain it. No one pathologized it. Sit with that for a second. A kid alone in a room and nothing was wrong. The internet would not know what to do with that. And then he grew up. And the world handed him a different interpretation. Friends called him distant. A partner once called him a locked door. By 30, he'd accepted the verdict everyone agreed on that something in him was broken, or missing, or cold. He had a tidy explanation for himself, and he hated it. He'd spent years apologizing for the one thing his childhood had actually done well. Here's the question that took him a long time to even ask. Was something missing from that house? Or was something quietly working? A quick note. Names and details have been changed. June is a composite drawn from common patterns I've encountered. Here's where it splits. Most explanations stop here and tell you the answer is sad. I want to give you a different one. To do that, I need to take you back to 1958. A paper barely 10 pages long. A pediatrician named Donald Winnicott. Stay with this part. Winnicott noticed something strange. The people who could be alone comfortably without that low hum of dread were not the people who'd been left alone the most. They were often people who, as small children, had been alone while someone safe was nearby. A parent in the next room. Not hovering, not absent, just reliably there. The child plays. The adult is present but not intruding. And slowly, the child internalizes something. The safety stops needing to be in the room. It moves inside. Winnicott called the foundation of this, and I'm quoting him, the experience of being alone while someone else is present. Out of enough of those moments, he said, a person builds the capacity to be alone, not as a fallback, as an achievement. Which means for some people, and this is the part that reorganizes everything, preferring your own company isn't the scar a childhood left. It's the proof a childhood gave you enough. Look back at June, the calm house, the parent who let him vanish without making it mean something. Under Winnicott's lens, that quiet wasn't neglect. It may have been the exact thing that built what he spent his 30s apologizing for. So why does hearing that still make some of you uncomfortable? Hold on to that. It's pointing at something real. Winnicott was careful about a distinction most videos blur completely. The capacity to be alone is not withdrawal, and it is not loneliness. It's a third thing. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection you don't have. Withdrawal is pulling back from connection that's available. The capacity to be alone is neither. It's being with yourself and feeling accompanied even when no one is there. So the real question was never alone versus lonely. That framing is too small. Now the hard part. Because not everyone who loves an empty room got there the way June did. There's a second road. It looks identical from the outside, same closed door, same release, but it runs the opposite direction. For these people, solitude isn't a capacity that was built. It's armor that was needed. An honest note here. This isn't a substitute for therapy. If being alone has started to feel less like a choice and more like the only place that doesn't hurt, please reach out to a licensed professional. So now we have a problem. If the safe kind and the armored kind look the same behavior, same door, how could you tell them apart? Not by how it feels, by what's driving it. Here's where the research gets useful instead of just sad. Developmental psychologists have studied why people pull away. Robert Copeland's work, building on Jens Asendorp's 1990 model, found something useful. The same behavior being alone runs on 3 different engines. Engine 1 is fear. You want to be with people, but anxiety blocks the door. Researchers call this shyness. The wanting is there. The wall is the problem. Engine 2 is dislike. Not fear of people, a learned, often protective aversion to the cost of dealing with them. This is the armored road. Engine 3 has no fear and no aversion. It's just a genuine, low-key pull toward your own company. Researchers call it unsociability, an ugly word for something that isn't ugly at all. And here's the part that matters. A 2023 study by Stefania Sett with Copeland compared these groups directly. That third one, the pull, not the wound, didn't carry the loneliness or the inner strain the other 2 did. Separate work has even linked it to creativity. Stop on that. Same closed door, 3 completely different rooms behind it, and almost everyone guesses their own room wrong. Watch how one person found out. June was in a therapist's office, not expecting anything. He was describing his week, the quiet, the work, the evenings with no one. And the therapist said something almost offhand. You describe being alone like it's an achievement, not an escape. He said it landed like a key in a lock. So he did the thing you can do too. He ran the 3 engines against his own life. Fear? He checked honestly. He didn't avoid people because dread blocked the door. He could walk into the room. He just didn't always want to stay. Dislike? Also no. He didn't resent people. He liked them, in measured amounts, and meant it. What was left was the third one, the pull. And when he traced it backward, it didn't lead to a wound. It led to a quiet house and a door he was always allowed to close. For the first time, the explanation he'd carried since his 20s that he was cold, that something failed, didn't fit the evidence. Something else did. Not a better story. A truer one. But knowing which engine is yours doesn't fix anything on its own. A name is not a solution. So here's what it actually changes and something you can do with it tonight. The next time the door closes and the room goes quiet. Most videos about this make a leap that doesn't hold. They spend 10 minutes telling you that you were wounded, adapted, broken in, and then, in the last minute, pivot to. But actually, it's a superpower. Wound to superpower. No bridge. It feels good and explains nothing. So here's the bridge. Adaptation and capacity are not 2 points on a timeline, where one becomes the other if you heal hard enough. They're 2 answers to one question. Which engine is running? This next part is the mechanism, not a pep talk. In the tradition Winnicott started, the capacity to be alone when it didn't form early is something people can build later, often inside the safety of a relationship like therapy. The armored kind of solitude is not a life sentence. In a 2018 study, Thuy Nguyen with Richard Ryan and Edward Detsy found that time alone reliably lowers high-intensity emotion. But the version that actually refuels you showed up specifically when people chose it, not when it was the only option left. And here's the counterintuitive part. You'd assume the people who benefit most from solitude are introverts. In 2022, Nguyen, with Netta Weinstein and Ryan, tested that directly. Introversion didn't predict who got the good version. Autonomy did. The sense that the choice was actually yours. Some of this, for some people, even starts as temperament. Jerome Kagan's long research found a fraction of infants are wired more reactive from the start. But he was careful, and so am I. It's a modest influence, not a verdict. The environment still moves it. So here's the thing you can do, tonight. The next time you close the door and feel that release, don't ask the old question, what's wrong with me? Ask the new one. Which engine just pulled me in here? Was it fear? Was it dislike? Or was it the pull? You don't have to fix anything. Just name it accurately. That's not nothing. Accuracy is the part you can actually act on. June didn't change much, by the way. He still works alone at night, still closes the door. What changed was the sentence underneath it. He stopped hearing his own quiet as evidence of damage, and started hearing it as evidence that, once, something went right. He didn't get louder. He got accurate. The behavior stayed identical. The story flipped. You're not trying to become someone who needs a crowd. You're trying to know, accurately, which version of you is sitting in the quiet. And let me say this plainly, because the internet usually won't. If your engine is the pull, you're not broken. And this isn't a problem you owe anyone a solution to. You don't have to socialize your way out of a self that was working fine. If your engine turned out to be fear or dislike, that's not a sentence either. It's information. And information was the thing you were missing, not the thing that condemns you. Caring about the people in your life and needing real distance from them are allowed to be true at the same time. They usually are. The question was never whether you should be alone. It's whether the quiet is something you chose or something you settled for. And that's a question only you can answer now. You finally have the 3 words for it. If you'd rather have psychology that hands you a question you can use, instead of just a mirror that tells you you're seen, that's the entire reason this channel exists. So here's mine for you. 1 word, in the comments. When the door closes and the room goes quiet, is it fear, dislike, or the pull? I go through every one. Not to diagnose you, just because the person who reads your word might recognize their own engine in it. And that's usually how someone starts to tell the 2 stories apart.